Hello there, my name's Emma. I have been celebrating my birthday on the 27th of October since I was a baby. But on my 18th birthday, I learned some new, shocking information about my birth. Last fall, on October 20th, I was having a typical day on my college campus until I received a mysterious box and a bouquet of flowers. The card said, "Happy birthday, Emma, Mom." It was weird because my birthday was on October 27th. And besides, my mom knew that I hated roses. I called her right away and she said that she didn't send me anything. For some mysterious reason, my mom got very nervous. But I told her that it was probably a mistake from the delivery service. And I didn't want to leave some girl out there without a birthday gift. So I called the delivery guy. He checked everything again. The order was correct. A random lady from Uruguay had sent me a gift and flowers. I opened the box and saw an old-fashioned doll and a letter. It was written in English with a lot of mistakes. The lady called herself Michaela. She claimed that she was my biological mother. According to her, I was born premature and was very weak. Doctors didn't register my birth because no one believed that I would survive. The letter also contained a copy of a birth certificate and a photo of a young woman who looked exactly like me. She was holding a small baby and smiling. I felt very weird. My parents had never told me anything about adoption. They're both from Argentina, but I grew up in the USA. I was convinced that I was Argentinian, even though I didn't look like my relatives. So, of course, I was intrigued. Michaela was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement and stay away from me. That's why she hadn't reached out to me on social media this whole time. She was afraid of my parents' revenge. And I wasn't surprised. My father's really intense. It's good for the family business, but our relationship has always been tough. Michaela has been waiting for years to write me. Since I was almost 18 years old, she invited me to visit Uruguay and to make up my own mind. She left an email in case I decided to reach out to her. After a week, I went to my parents' house. My folks had organized a fabulous birthday party for me, but I couldn't relax and have fun. Part of me was still thinking about that letter. When I was looking at that picture, something told me that it was true. On the other hand, I didn't want to break my parents' hearts by telling them that I doubted them. So I finally came up with a plan to go to Uruguay secretly to meet Michaela. My parents had put a solid sum of money in my bank account as a gift for my birthday, and I could easily afford to take that trip. I sent an email to Michaela and she provided me with the details and her current address. I had a long, exhausting flight to Montevideo, after which I took a bus to her native town. The neighborhood looked very poor and dusty. It was the scariest moment of my life, and I felt like the main character of an action movie. Michaela met me at a bus station with two little kids, Mia and Carlos. She gave me a hug, and I cried. She didn't look like that young woman from the picture anymore, but I still liked her. We went to her house. She told me that my father had died before I was born. She didn't have any money to take care of me, and her decision to give me away for adoption was the hardest decision of her life. Many years later, she got married to Diego and gave birth to Mia and Carlos. But he was an alcoholic and behaved awfully. Michaela had kicked him out of the house and told him that she wanted a divorce. We had a family dinner, and Michaela offered to let me stay and sleep on a couch. I was exhausted by the trip and fell asleep immediately. In the middle of the night, I woke up hearing noises. I sensed the smell of alcohol. Suddenly, someone turned the TV on and flopped down on the couch without even noticing me. I shouted, and he bounced off the couch. It was Diego, and he was scared to death. He began to yell in Spanish, and he tried to push me out of the house. Michaela and the kids woke up. She tried to calm him down, but he was very drunk and aggressive. He kept on screaming that the house was his property. He threatened Michaela and the kids. They had a barn in the backyard, and Diego made us go there. He tried to lock us in there until we learned to behave well. Nobody knew that I was in Uruguay, and I didn't want to be locked in a barn for ages. I panicked. I pushed Diego and grabbed the key. He fell on the floor, and we ran out of the barn. I locked him in from outside. Then I called a taxi and took Michaela and the kids to a hotel. In the morning, Michaela confessed that she had heart disease and was only given about 5 years to live. But if I could get an acknowledgement of parentage as soon as possible, she would be able to apply for a green card and move to the USA to spend the rest of her life with me. She was crying and begging me to forgive her and protect her children from that jerk. I suggested going to the police, but she said that Diego himself worked at the local police office. So I decided to help them relocate to Montevideo. Later that night, I hired 3 movers to help me with packing Michaela's stuff. I told her to stay at the hotel because of her weak heart. The movers put the stuff in a truck, and when we were ready to go, I gave them a key to let Diego out of the barn. He had just woken up and said he didn't remember anything about last night. Later that night, we looked at several apartments in the city and rented one nice place. I paid for everything and gave Michaela extra cash for living and medical treatment. We spent several more days together. I helped them to unpack their bags and find a kindergarten for the kids. I enjoyed spending time with them, but it was time to return home. When I arrived back to the USA, I went to my parents' house for the weekend. My father suggested that I spend the money they gave me as a birthday gift on a new car, but I told them that I had already given away that money to my biological mother. They were shocked. My mom grabbed her heart and began to cry. She confessed that they had adopted me at a very early age and decided not to tell me because my biological mother, Michaela, had died 17 years ago. I didn't want to believe them. They asked questions about the woman I met with and forced me to call her, but she didn't pick up the phone. It was too painful for me to stay in that house, so I headed to campus and turned to my friend Sergey. He's a law school student. He was very skeptical about that story and suggested that I do a DNA test. Later that night, I called Michaela and asked her to do a DNA test before we initiated any further legal procedures. I told her that it was my parents' condition. Michaela was offended. She said the test was unnecessary because she remembered perfectly how she had given birth to me. She began to cry and hung up. Later, she sent me a picture of my original birth certificate saying, "Isn't that enough?" I was very confused. I didn't want to believe that I had been deceived. The next day, my parents arrived on the campus. They apologized for their lies, and I apologized for mine. Meanwhile, my enthusiastic dad had hired a private investigator named Mr. Nelson. I told Mr. Nelson about my trip to Uruguay. He promised to help. My parents forbade me to contact Michaela, but she sent me so many messages. In most of them, she was asking me to send more money. But after a while, she just disappeared, and her phone number was blocked. After a month, Mr. Nelson, my parents, and I went to Uruguay together and visited the hospital where I was born. Mr. Nelson had discovered that the woman from the old picture was my real mother holding me. She died soon after my birth. As for my biological father, his identity was still unknown. Michaela refused to tell anyone about him. Meanwhile, my biological mother used to have a friend named Dora who looked very similar to her. Michaela was an orphan, and it was easy for Dora to steal her documents and her identity. And then she tried to use me to get money and a green card. I took my parents to the apartment that I had rented. Some stranger opened the door and said that the previous tenant had disappeared. We filed a lawsuit against her for identity theft and fraud. Soon the police caught Dora. She had been on the run for years and had many aliases in her portfolio. The authorities took her kids to an orphanage. Diego wasn't even their father or Dora's husband. She just hired a friend to jerk me around. After a couple of days, my parents told me that they had another surprise for me. They took me to a wild village. We drove forever. Mr. Nelson had found my granny. He paid a visit to Dora in the prison and asked her about my biological father. His name was Raul, and he died in a motorcycle accident when my mother was pregnant. That's why she didn't want to tell anyone about the father of her child. It was too painful for her. My cute, brand-new granny had no idea that she had a granddaughter. Raul was a restless teenager when he ran away from home. He moved from town to town and never told his mom that he had a girlfriend. It's needless to say that my granny was very happy to meet me and cried her eyes out. I looked through the old pictures of my father He was very handsome and happy. I felt so sorry for both of my biological parents and imagined what our life would have been like together. The next day, I asked my parents to stay at the hotel and give me some time to be by myself. I went to the cemetery to visit my father's and my mother's graves, and I brought them flowers. It's weird, but I feel grateful for Dora's fraud, because thanks to her, now I know where I came from. I celebrate my birthday twice a year and have a beautiful Uruguayan grandmother. I also began to appreciate my adoptive parents even more. I cannot even call them that really, because they are still my parents and I love them.